What's going on, everybody? Jeremy Ritz here, previewing the final week of August in the stock market. And what a crazy day we had on Friday. Jerome Powell spoke in Jackson Hole and things just took off. And the question is are we going to get continuation this week? Are we going to start pulling back into September, which is historically the worst month in the stock market? Want to know what's going to happen? Find out in today's market review and preview. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? Jeremy Ritz here. Can't wait to set this week up for you, and we're going to dive right in looking at the data that is going to be on the block for this week. Monday, we're really not going to get too much information that's going to move the market, but if we come over to Tuesday, we see that we are going to get durable goods orders coming in at 8:30 a.m. and that is going to move the market. It's forecasted to come in at negative 4%. And then we are going to get some Fed speakers who will come in later that day. There are going to be a few Fed speakers this week, actually. On Wednesday, not much. We do have Fed Barkin speaking at 12:45. And then Thursday is the big day because we are going to get GDP. We'll get initial job claims. So that's going to be, initial jobless claims. So that's going to be something that we want to pay attention to. GDP is expected to come in at 3%. And then if we come over to Friday, we are going to get core PCE, personal income, personal spending. And so really there is lots of data this week, durable goods, GDP, PCE, that is going to move the market. So make sure that you're ready. Again, that's Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And oh yeah, we cannot forget about earnings, and specifically, who are we talking about? None other than Nvidia. We'll talk about this chart a little bit later. I'll have a preview video coming Monday, tomorrow, about Nvidia earnings, but that's going to be on Wednesday. So this is going to be one heck of a week for traders. So I hope you're ready, and let me get you prepared. So I talked about the SPX and the move that we had in the broader markets after Jerome Powell spoke in Jackson Hole, where he was neutral to a little bit dovish. And you could see that this thing pushed very, very hard. It nearly got to an all-time high. Didn't quite get there on the SPX. But the bulls firmly took out the weakness that came in last week, closed above the previous 3 days candles, really the previous 4 days candles, and now is flirting with that all-time high. If you come over to the SPY, interestingly enough, it did actually make an all-time high. And if we look at the Qs, we could see that it didn't get back up to all-time highs, but it did have a strong push up. So there was a lot of enthusiasm that came into the markets on Friday based on what Powell had said. He didn't promise a rate cut. He really stuck to his script of saying that the Fed's going to be data dependent in terms of how they'll make decisions in terms of fiscal policy. But market makers liked what he had to say, and you saw that big move up. And I just want to come back over here to the SPX and show you the 3-minute chart just so you could see here. But look at this smash. I mean, boom, we open with a gap up, and then we pushed up higher, pulled back a little bit. Then look at this candle. And this is right when Powell started speaking around 10. It went up, let's see, in a matter of 10 a.m. to the end of that candle. This is a 3-minute candle, 56 points. So that was one hell of a move there for the bulls. They push it up, and then it just kind of really lingered up at the top there. We did get a little bit of selling at the end of the day, but it was a strong move, and you would think that there's going to be continuation on Monday. Now, I'll give you reasons why we should get continuation and maybe some reasons to be cautious about what potentially could happen. But when you have this big of a candle, a bullish engulfing candle like this, that is following weakness where bears were trying to drop the market, you are going to have some bears who are trapped in their shorts and have to close in order to avoid continuing to lose. So that alone should provide an initial pop, a spike. Doesn't mean that it's going to hold. And more than likely what I can anticipate seeing tomorrow is we open with a gap up, and then that gets faded down, back down to the all-time highs, where we just kind of hang out there tomorrow. So that's what I'm anticipating. But what is unique about the weekends, obviously, is that crypto trades 24/7. And let's go take a look at Bitcoin, which is it's taking, I don't want to say it's taking a beating or down significantly because it's still at $112,000. However, that entire gain that came in on Friday was wiped out. And you can see here on Sunday, we made a low of $110,629.73. It since got bought up off of that 100 SMA on the daily, but there was a big move down. And you can see right now, Bitcoin is down 2,400 points, a little over 2,400 points. And you have to wonder if that's going to point to some weakness that will come into the market tomorrow. Are we going to see all those gains faded and it go away? Who knows? Typically, the final week of August is somewhat bullish ahead of the weak month that is September. But we have to be a little bit defensive and on guard here with this weakness that we see that came in on Bitcoin. Now, when we hop over to Ethereum, uniquely, is it did touch briefly. It almost looks like it. Let me go into the 1 minute here just so we could see. I think that it got close. I'm not sure if it touched 5,000. No, it didn't quite get there. But it had a nice pop, but it too sold down like Bitcoin did. So again, just something to pay attention to here. Are we going to see the weakness that we've seen here with crypto over the weekend? Is that going to rub off on the rest of the market? We don't know, but it's something to take into consideration as we get ready to open tonight with futures at 6 p.m. I can't wait to see what happens there. And then we get the market open at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. So just something to put on your radar. I did think that was pretty interesting. Dow Jones Industrial made a new all-time high here. Look at the move that this had. It finally smashed through that upper resistance trend line, and this now should serve as a support. If it does want to come back down and retest here, you could see that there are some very thick volume nodes on the VRVP that are also lined up with that. You had big volume come in, but there definitely should be some continuation here. That's a strong move. You have lots of bears who are trapped, but finally you get that all-time high on the Dow Jones Industrial, and the one that still has yet to make that all-time high is IWM, but with rate cuts, that's going to be bullish for the small caps. A heck of a candle that came in here. Great volume above all those volume nodes on the VRVP. And it's got to get through 245.13 if this thing's going to make a new all-time high. It's close to being overbought, but it's not quite there yet. So it does have some room where it can run. So keep an eye on IWM here, whether or not it can make a push and make a new all-time high before all's said and done. And then let's take a look at the 10-year Treasury. We could see that fell off a cliff here on Friday as equities were popping. We saw a pretty significant drop. It got rejected off that 50 SMA on the daily and now is back down that 100 on the weekly. And the VIX, we are burning down the VIX, as I like to say here on Courage Pays Better Than Fear. And look at that big, massive bar that came in after a push higher. And we are now down below the lows that the VIX made in February when we made all-time highs, but I'd like to see if it can get down to where we were in December following the Trump election hype. We have quite a ways to go for it to come down here, but again, just because we're looking at the broader markets and we had that huge run, we have the VIX down, we have the 10-year down, we still need to be cautious because we know that September historically, seasonally, is a weak month, and we don't want to get trapped, so we still have to have our head on a swivel when it comes to the markets. But everything looks like continuation is in play. I'm looking for a gap up tomorrow and for that to sell down and retest the old all-time highs. But like I said, keep an eye on what happens with the crypto space, with Bitcoin, and if we continue to sell off. We did touch that. We actually broke through that 100 SMA on a daily, and Bitcoin did correct 10% now. So 11% with that fall that we had here today. So I just think this is interesting. Pay attention to it. It doesn't mean that we're going to see that in stocks, but it is worth monitoring. All right, so let's just get into a few tickers here. We're going to look at the MAG 8, starting with Amazon. Amazon had a nice push on Friday here after a pullback into the 50. Big, strong candle above its 10-day exponential moving average. We do have a volume node up here at 230, 231. We have the gap that it filled before it dropped on earnings, but this one could be ready for a move higher should we see the broader markets continue to run. If we take a look at good old Apple, after that massive move that it had after it announced the investments in the US, we finally got some rest and a pullback, which is typical to happen after such a move. And we did break below the 10. We didn't come down and retest that 20 EMA on the daily. We did get a bounce, and now we are back above the 10. Can it push out of here? Yes. Historically, if you go look at Apple, when it had these moves in the past, these big moves, you could see that big push up, a retest into the 10, and then starting its next leg higher. So potentially we could see something like that on Apple. I'm still bullish on this company. We still don't know what their AI effort is going to be. So just keep an eye on Apple and potentially what they can do. Goog, the Googster, makes a new all-time high on Friday, finally, and they are not even overbought on the RSI. We're seeing the MACD curl up, giving some momentum, nice volume that came in, and there's probably a little bit more room left to run here on Google. I have a price target here of 225 that I'm looking for. Again, looking for really everything to start with a gap up and then a retest lower tomorrow. Let's see if that all-time high gets retested, but a nice move by Google setting that all-time high. Coming over to Tesla, look at this bar that is in play, a big fatty green bar. And this thing had a heck of a move here on Friday. But again, it's really just range bound. If I'm looking at this and just kind of zooming out, all the price action is just right in this range. We're just chopping around here. And until we get a strong break out of this range, either to the upside or the downside, to me, I don't see any edge in terms of trading it. And I definitely, because of how volatile Tesla is, I'm not going to set up a spread on it. So I'm just kind of watching it from afar to see what it can do. But it does look like it's on the verge of potentially breaking out here. So I'll watch. Lots of support down here if it would come further. I would really like to see this gap get filled down here. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I'm going to wait before I touch Tesla. If you're going to trade it, I wish you the best of luck with that. Meta, this is going to be the one stock I told my community members. This is the one stock I'm going to kick myself in the rear end for not getting a position in early in the year and sticking with it. I did have a position, but sold it. But man, I think this one is getting ready for a bit of a run here. We had that gap up on earnings, made several new all-time highs, retested this 50 SMA in the daily, this nice bull candle that came in here. Sure, we have a lot to work through, but I think that this one, if it gets moving, can really push because it hasn't hit $1,000. And I think that that is on the table for the stock. So just keep an eye on Meta this week. Let's see what it can do. I think that this has some definite potential to the upside. So definitely watching Meta. We're going to save Nvidia here. Netflix. So again, this was interesting because out of all the green that was in the market, Netflix finished red. And it's really been pretty weak here after it hit that all-time high and after it announced earnings. It's just been really sideways. Now, if we look at its reporting for earnings in October, the last several years, that it has had big moves higher. So keep an eye on Netflix to maybe just show more sideways movement, some chop, maybe a little bit of a sell-off, and then move up on earnings. So I'm watching Netflix, but there's no bullish edge here right now. Probably, like I said, some sideways movement, more of a dip. It would be really nice to get this thing down at that 200 and then catch a bounce on earnings. So watching Netflix for that. Microsoft, after hitting that all-time high, sold down, but like Meta, finding some support at that 50. Let's see if we get a bounce here. We do have some resistance from the VRVP. Are we going to see some of this money shift into Apple or into some of the small caps with rate cuts coming? We don't know, but we're seeing that dip on Microsoft that has come in. And then Nvidia, I'm just going to look at this really quickly because I'll have a whole full-length video coming into tomorrow. They're going to have a perfect report because they're up near all-time highs. What I would like to see heading into this report is if we can get a little bit of a sell down into that 50 and just kind of hang out here and then move higher off their earnings report. I mean, typically they crush it. So let's keep an eye and see what happens here. But really, the fact that they're lingering up near all-time highs logically says that they should correct and come down. But Nvidia has a history of being at all-time highs and making even more all-time highs. So just because this thing is up in rarefied air doesn't mean that it has to come down. So just have that on your radars. It will move the entire market. That is on Wednesday. All right, and just a couple other tickers that I want to take a look at. We have CRCL. Let me get these lines off here for a second. But this thing filled the gap and did get a nice bounce that came in here. Sold off the day after that and then got a nice push on Friday, but got rejected again. So this thing is kind of hanging out. This was a great ticker for me to day trade back in June and July. So I am watching this one once we get some steam back in the crypto market, but it did fill that gap. So really anything is possible here. Let's see if we can maybe get a little bit more of a dip. Let's get this thing down to being oversold on the RSI, and then maybe it's time to try long there. But I'm watching that. UNH, man, I sold this thing too early and it pushed up higher, but we are at a bit of a resistance here. Right now, you could see on the VRVP, and if you just look to the left, the past several months here, July into June, this has kind of been an interesting price area where it really couldn't get above. But notice we do have this gap above us here at 376. That's going to be the next target, but in order to get there, it's going to have to take out this 100 simple day moving average. I'm going to wait to see if we can get a bit of a retest into the 10, and if we get a nice candle, I may consider taking this one long again. But there should be some more steam left in UNH after Uncle Warren made his investment in this company. So definitely keeping an eye on that one. Just taking a look at a few more here. Roblox filled its earnings gap. Remember, it had that big drop down here, and I didn't update my lines on this guy, but it's made a nice recovery. And so anybody who stayed in I was going to call it Roblox, who stayed in Roku, you've been rewarded because it did come back. And now we'll see. It's right back up at that resistance where it's tested multiple times. And let's see if it could shoot out of here. If it can, again, this is one when we zoom out, we know that there's plenty of room above it. And I've said before that, like Roblox, it's just been kind of chopping sideways for several years. Can it break out and, not saying hit 492, but start climbing back up into that price area? So keeping an eye on Roku. It's pretty interesting at this point, and I think there is some opportunity there. So definitely keep an eye on that. I'm going to take a look at Boeing here really quickly. So here's a look on the weekly. You could see that we are still being held down by that 100 SMA in the monthly, but above that, there is nothing holding this back. So I'm watching for a break there. We do have a little bit of upper resistance here if I just draw a trend line. So watch for a break above that. And again, if it can get above that 100, if you can catch that move, that 100 on the monthly, this thing could run. I am watching this. This is at the top of my list to monitor. So keep an eye on Boeing. And let's just take a look at a couple other tickers here. Let's take a look at Palantir. I haven't cleaned this chart up yet, but Palantir got punished this week. We had that big old drop down. I mean, look at this fall from all-time highs down to, it's about 25% correction. And you can see here, this candle itself from the open here, this thing dropped, let's see, $9.71 the day before. It dropped $13.14. So there was a 2-day period where it dropped over $20. People were saying Palantir was dead, but this thing just probably provided an opportunity to go long again. So keep an eye on this one. Nice little rebound. But notice we are still below the 10 and the 20, so it's going to have to make a move. But notice very thin volume above. So if it could break this node here where it got rejected on Friday, there is a bit of smooth selling. So keep an eye on that. The trade desk. I got a question from Scott about the trade desk. How does this one look? Is it time to take this one long? Again, when things fall like this, we just want to give it some time to settle out. You can see if we zoom out here, we had a big gap down on earnings in January, another massive gap down here just a few weeks ago. And really, we're just kind of hanging out in the same areas here. And really, this could be interpreted as a massive double bottom, okay? But we need to see some buying come in. We need to see a break above at least this volume node. Let's get it back above the 10. Let's see the RSI start to flip. Let's see some momentum come back into this one. But maybe not a bad place to start grabbing some shares. Again, this is a good company. They were added to the S&P 500, but they've got a lot of work to do to get back to where they were. So oversold for quite some time. The second time it's been oversold. Kind of reminds me of UNH in the sense that it's been punished multiple times. So eventually it will come back. It's just how long is it going to take? It might take multiple months to even a year, but probably not a bad spot to start building a position. And if it comes lower and gets back to the 2022 bear market lows, start building a position. So there's the take on the trade desk. And then just let me take a look through the list here, see if there's anything else I want to look at. And I think that's going to do it. So again, we'll see what happens here. One more look at Bitcoin. We're down even more. It was 2,500 when I started recording the video. We're down 2,700. Let's see if that flips. But again, in the broader markets, I'm expecting a gap up and see those gains get faded over time. However, I do have a bit of caution just because of the weakness that's coming in from Bitcoin. If we're going to see that spill over into equities, we'll find out. But that's going to do it. It's going to be a fun week. GDP, PCE, Nvidia. It's going to be crazy. The last week of August typically is bullish. September is an awful month. I'll have this week the September preview video. I'm going to have the Nvidia earnings. Lots of other things coming your way. And don't forget about the free beginner trading and investing bootcamp. I'm going to be launching the 15th, 16th, and 17th of September at 8:30 p.m. I hope you can join me. I'm going to be giving away cash to fund your trading account and other prizes. So sign up. You can find that. That'll be linked actually in the show notes from this video. And that's all. Everybody have a phenomenal day, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Thank you for your support of Courage Pays Better Than Fear. Make it a great day. Don't care. Ride the